There we go. Hello everyone. I know I'm a little bit later than 3 o'clock, but just had to set everything up. So today's video is going to be a little bit differently. If I can get my words out. Today's video is going to go a bit different from how other videos that I've done so far have gone. Previous videos have been reviews of episodes of Most Haunted so far. This isn't that. So all the Friday videos are going to be discussion type things, either reviews or discussions based on what post I have released on the Friday. So today's video is about the post that I released a couple of hours ago, which is what I class as an experience post, which is something I haven't done for a while, but is something that I will continue doing. And those posts focus on an experience that someone has shared. So things like episodes of Uncanny are probably going to be classed as that type of thing. I don't know how I'm going to do those, if I'm going to do as a review or just discussing someone's experience. I need to properly sit down, watch and analyse an episode of that, as I've only seen one episode of that to date. But at the moment, there is a YouTube investigation team called Overnight who have videos on their channel. You may or may not be familiar with them. I feel like they're quite a big group, but other people might not. They may not have heard of them. But the Overnight channel does various investigations, haunted locations. They work with, I think it's NESPA is the name of the group. It's the group that the Warrens set up in America. And they've worked with them, they've investigated the Warrens Museum and stuff. So right away I took interest in that group from the connection with the Warrens. And then I saw they have a series on their YouTube channel called Haunted Homies, which is a live show that they do, which you can attend. And through these live shows, they ask their fans to write in stories. Well, not stories, but experiences that they've had. And then they will read them out through the show, and they will then invite whoever it is that's written the experience up on the stage, and they'll ask them questions about it and learn a bit more about the experience in a bit more depth. And they usually do that with about 4 people a show. It's something like that. Each video tends to be about an hour long, and each person tends to have 10 to 20 minutes worth of talking about the experience. So because of this, because I saw the first episode of Haunted Homies a while ago, because it's a thing that they were doing throughout last year, and I saw it, it might have even been the year before, but I saw it and I was like, that's really interesting. And it's good that they've had people writing in their experiences and that they're sharing these experiences and they're asking questions about them. But my issue with it was that it was one short segment, like each experience was one short segment within an hour-long YouTube video, amidst many YouTube videos on their channel. And throughout it as well, the Overnight team tends to joke a lot, which is fine. I have no issue with that. Obviously, they want viewers, and a good way of doing that is by joking and putting across personality and things. And whereas with what I do, I tend to focus more on the factual and try and stick just to here's how it is kind of thing. But they do the entertainment thing as well, which is fine. But it means that a lot of the experience and a lot of the discussion around the experience ends up getting bogged down in a lot of stuff, and it kind of gets lost, which is why I do these posts, to highlight the experience in its own post. So it's one post per experience, and then you can just go onto the blog and you can search from the experience tag, and then you can look down a long list of experiences, and yeah, eventually some of them are going to get somewhat lost in that, but I would much rather an experience get lost amongst experiences than it get lost amongst a bunch of random stuff, if that makes sense. So that's why I do these posts. And I have contacted the overnight team in particular, back when I first started doing it, asking if I could use stuff from, like, if I could write up about the experiences, and they did say yes, which was very kind of them to do so. By logic of, it's on YouTube, it's a free platform, it's out there in the internet, you can use it under, I think it's fair use, I'm not sure, but they said I could use it for those reasons. I was like, yeah, that's cool. So here, I've transcribed the story. I've also transcribed the question and answer segment, but I will not read out the question. I will not read out the question and answer segment, as I think that will get a bit drony, repetitive potentially if I read it out. But it is all typed up on the blog through today's post. So if you want to look at the question and answer segment, then that's absolutely fine. You can go to the blog post, or you can watch the original video from the Overnight channel. It's the third episode. This particular experience happens about 50 minutes of the way through of the episode. But I'll read out the experience and then discuss it. So yeah, it's an interesting experience and quite different from what I tend to discuss on this blog, because on this blog I tend to discuss, you know, purely like paranormal things in regards to ghosts, and to an extent angels, demons, that type of paranormal, but this is a little bit different, kind of touches on all of that, but it's quite different. So reading out the experience. So Blake had written into the Overnight channel saying, I was living on the East Coast in Connecticut where I grew up. It was a house that my family had built on virgin ground. Now, if you're familiar with the East Coast, specifically Connecticut, you know that Native Americans were hunted and killed to the point of non-existence, specifically the Mohegan tribe. I grew up in that area. Flash forward to when I am in existence. It's winter, I was about 7 or 8 years old enough to go hunting and know how to handle a firearm. The house was relatively close to a neighbour's house you could see through the trees, roughly 100 yards apart. The back of the house faced my bedroom window, and their house had motion-activated lights. Well, one windless night, I will never forget this, it's been over 20 years now, the lights went on and woke me up. I thought it was strange. Being so young and clueless about Native American law, I decided to look out of the window. To my shock, I saw a pale figure darting between the trees. It looked tall but on all fours, human-like but not in the same instance, with what seemed like glowing eyes. In fear, I ran up to my father's room to wake him. At this point in my life, my parents had gotten divorced. He awoke and told me it was just a dream. A few days passed and it happened again. This time, it had just snowed heavily. Same creature as before. This time, I woke my father and told him a strange man was by my window. He jumped out of his bed and grabbed the hunting firearms we had, his rifle and my little 20-gauge shotgun. We threw on jackets and grabbed some lights and went on the hunt. I knew if I told him about the creature, he would have brushed it off. My father, a Vietnam veteran, didn't believe in any paranormal stuff. He called the shows he saw about it stupid hippie mumbo jumbo, and he used to make me laugh when he would say it. But when we got to where I saw the creature, he believed, for in the snow there were barefoot tracks, huge prints bigger than my head, and spaced apart as if an animal walked on all fours, but instead of just footprints, there were scratches and handprints too. Years later, I did research, come to find out what I had seen was a Wendigo, or what the Native Americans called it. Now, the reason why I've said Wendigo there is because that's how the experience was read out. Later on, when Blake talks about it, he calls it Wendigo. So that's a very interesting experience that Blake wrote into the Overnight channel. And I'd say it's quite different from what I usually discuss, because that experience in particular was, and I should actually probably read a little bit of the Q&A part, because of the other bit of experience, because he does discuss it in there. But starting off with the Wendigo, I think it is pronounced Wendigo. It could be Wendigo. I think it's Wendigo. Throughout the the interview, the overnight team refer to it as a Wendigo, probably confusing it with the dingo dog, which I'm pretty sure is of Australian existence. Kind of, I can't remember, but you know, that kind of animal. So they probably thought of it as like a werewolf, but a dingo. So that's probably how they were thinking of it. I don't know whether or not it's because Blake mistyped it and accidentally put Wendigo in the thing as opposed to Wendigo, but either way, he does pronounce it Wendigo when he's discussing it, so it is that creature he's referring to. Now, my own knowledge of the Wendigo is very, very, very limited. In the written review, I say that my only knowledge of a Wendigo really comes from the TV program Supernatural, which it's been a long time since I've seen that program now. I think it appeared in the first season. And that TV program, if you're not familiar with it, is a fictional TV program about two brothers who go out hunting various creatures from folklore. So angels, demons, werewolves, vampires, it's all in a fictional world where they are all 100% real, and this group called Hunters knows about them and hunts them down. But just because that's a fictional program doesn't mean that those things don't exist within folklore of our own world. They, as far as I'm aware, everything in the program has some sort of real world basis. So, for instance, there's a character included eventually called Metatron, who is also featured in the program Good Omens, which is completely separate. And in Supernatural, he's God's scribe, and in Good Omens, he's kind of depicted in that kind of a way. But he is an actual figure in Christian mythology with the Bible and things. At least I think it's Christian mythology he's featured in. But he exists. That's an example of how things featured in the program Supernatural are based on actual myth, legend, folklore, that kind of thing. And the Wendigo is no different. It, as Blake is described here, they exist within Native American folklore. My own knowledge of it from the program Supernatural, because I've done no research into them as of yet. I will do a blog post about them, because they exist within folklore. They are technically a branch of the paranormal, because they are cryptids, and I think cryptid is a sub-thing of that. So with the Wendigo, my own knowledge of it, please correct me if I'm wrong, is they are creatures born of cannibalism. You know, they are, in the program Supernatural at least, they are depicted as once human, but human who has consumed human flesh, and then as a result kind of gets an addiction for it and then becomes this monstrous creature. I could be very wrong with that in terms of the actual folklore. Like I say, I will do a blog post on it. I will write more about that in terms of the actual truth behind the folklore and the actual facts and details. But Blake here said he has seen one, and describes it as a kind of tall, pale creature, which is kind of my memories of it from that program. And one thing I will mention here is the overnight team questions it, because he then starts talking about cryptids and says it's classed as a cryptid, and then they're like, what are they called, a cryptid? And they're asking him, is that a sub-branch of cryptids and things like that. And it baffled me a little bit how the overnight channel don't know about cryptids, because they very heavily investigate the paranormal, and you know, I've been doing this for just over a year now, really, and I was aware of cryptids. I don't know the ins and outs of everything about them, but I've heard of them, and they reacted like they never heard of them, which struck me as a bit odd. But that aside, Blake seeing the Wendigo is very, very interesting. And that particular experience he shares, I am going to put that down. See, I want to, straight away I hear about it because I'm very skeptical on cryptids, and I want to put it down as just, it was a dream. And he is questioned a little bit about it. He is asked about how his dad reacted and things like that. There was a lot of discussion there. And he said that him and his dad didn't really talk about it because they were hunting at the time, and you don't really talk while hunting because you're trying to figure out what it is and you're trying not to scare whatever it is you're after, which is absolutely fine and understandable. And he also said his dad's a very closed-off individual who took a long time to actually discuss his war experiences with him. But this type of thing, I think, is quite different from that. And he said that whenever he tries to talk to his dad about it, his dad just kind of replies with, huh? And then, just seems a bit questioning, and then just gets back to what he was doing. So that makes me think that it was a dream. The thing that makes me doubt it was a dream was the fact it happened twice. So he said on 2 different occasions. The first time, he woke up, told his dad, there's a monster outside, and his dad was like, no, there's not, go back to bed. Second time, said, there's a strange man by my window. And then he was like, okay, we're going to go after it. And then they saw the tracks and things. So if it had just been that first time, I'd have been like, right, Blake's just been dreaming. That's what's happened here. But the fact it happened a second time, and it's the same creature and everything that he saw, makes me wonder what he saw. And the fact that there are tracks and things, I am unaware of the area. So he said, let's have a look, east coast of Connecticut. So Elton does ask him which part, and he says a small town called Ledyard, or Ledyard, I don't know how you pronounce it. So that's where he's from, and he said that he's seen this creature. And I don't know what that area is like. I don't know what the wildlife is like. With footprints, he describes them as being kind of like this big, I think. I don't know if there are any creatures in that area which could potentially create tracks that big. As for scratches, all sorts of creatures can cause scratches. But the interesting thing as well, he refers to it as barefoot, and not as in like the feet of a bear. They do clarify this. They say it's barefoot as in you can see toes, as in it just doesn't have shoes on, that kind of barefoot. So for massive footprints like that, it's very interesting. And all of these details make me wonder, I mean, maybe he dreamt it twice, I don't know. He said it was about 20 years ago, which it'll actually be interesting to like look at when Supernatural aired to see whether or not he watched that episode and then like had a nightmare about it. Because I'm just thinking 20 years ago, that's probably about the time that episode aired. Now that I come to think about it. But yeah, it's a very interesting experience to have had. And like I say, with it happening twice, that's the thing that's throwing me. If it was just the once, I'd have been like, it's a dream. Surely he's just gone to sleep, had a nightmare about something. Maybe he's dreamt the hunt part. Maybe he's dreamt the initial part. I feel like, looking at it logically, from what he's said, the first time actually happened, and then the second time he dreamt it. That's the only thing I can think. And like I said, I'm very skeptical on cryptids, so that's why I'm leaning more towards surely it's a dream. And it's that typical happens at night type thing as well. And you can hallucinate at night as you're about to go to sleep and things, so maybe he was at that point. Just before going to sleep, he saw the light come on, he looked outside, he was very tired, he was a kid, looked outside, saw something in the distance, in the light, so the light cast a pale reflection on whatever it was he saw. Could have just been the neighbour putting out the bins, I don't know what his neighbour looks like, or something like that, but, and then as a result, he was like, oh, creepy creature, because he's half asleep, and then he goes to sleep, and then he dreams about going on this hunt with his dad. And that's why his dad doesn't acknowledge it. Because maybe his dad's like, I don't know what you're on about, that never happened. But because his dad is clearly a man of few words, he's not told him that. Maybe? I don't know. That's the only thing I can think. In terms of a skeptical argument, anyway. In terms of a believing argument, it is very interesting. And he says that the woods around that area, they go for miles, they seem like they're never going to end and whatnot, so it is that part of the world where it's like, that's interesting. Because they have that logic of the forest has not been completely explored, like every inch hasn't been explored. So could it have been some sort of creature like that? Maybe. We don't know everything about the world, and new species of animals are still being discovered. I think it was fairly recently they discovered a new species of spiders, so maybe there could be larger creatures out there we haven't discovered yet. But in terms of, like, do I think Wendigos exist? If what I'm aware of them is true, it sounds very much so like a precautionary tale rather than a true thing. So, you know, creature born of cannibalism, maybe way back when the legend was created, it might have been at the turning point where in a particular tribe it was possibly seen as all right to you know, for cannibalism to be a thing, and then another tribe were like, no, we shouldn't do that, that's wrong, it's immoral. And at that turning point, they then created the Wendigo legend to then deter people from following the ways of cannibalism that other tribes may have been doing at the time, and to try and kind of teach people, look, this is wrong, by kind of scaring them and by saying, look, if you become a cannibal, you will become this horrific creature in the eyes of others. And I think that's what it is. I think it's more relating around warning against cannibalism and being seen as a monster in the eyes of others rather than literally. I think that is probably more suitable explanation. But having said that, I do not know the ins and outs of the Wendigo. I might be completely wrong with what I've said regarding cannibalism and things regarding the Wendigo. But yeah, but that's that experience. Now, onto the Hellhounds and things, which is a little bit more interesting. Now, he didn't write in this story. Blake just kind of casually brought it up in the middle of the question and answer segment with the team. And then the team were like, no, you've got to keep going. Like, please tell us more about this Hellhound. And the experience that he had, I'm not going to read out the question and answer segment, so I am paraphrasing when I'm discussing this one. He said he was at a girlfriend. No, he was not at a girlfriend. He was at a graveyard with an ex-girlfriend of his, and they did a Ouija board session in that graveyard. And during the session, they saw a hellhound. They were terrified. They left it mid-session, went home. He then came back the next day to collect the board. Like he said, he closed out the session. Then he picked up the board, took it home, and then he could hear the planchette moving under his bed. Which is in itself a lot of interesting details, and unfortunately he doesn't give much about the Hellhound or about that experience in general, which is why I've kind of tagged it on to the Wendigo one. Otherwise, if he'd have given significant information on it, I'd have done it as its own post, but he doesn't, so I've kind of tagged it on here. Do I think that this happened? Again, I'm sceptical on this experience too. When you're in a graveyard and you're doing a Ouija board session at night, I mean, straight away people will go, well, you shouldn't be doing that anyway. And I, to an extent, agree. I think it can be seen as disrespectful to investigate graveyards, and so that doesn't quite sit right. But at the same time, I also don't think that many spirits will be haunting a graveyard, or at least not the ones who are buried there. But with this Hellhound, I think he was probably just doing the session. You know, it's a spooky atmosphere, you're in a graveyard, you're hearing all sorts of noises and things. And then I think he probably just saw a stray animal. I think whether it be a dog or something else, I don't know what it's like in America. So I think he just saw this stray creature off in the distance. He doesn't give detail on what he saw. So it's hard to comment on it, but I think he just saw a stray creature. Maybe it might have even been a fox. Maybe he thought Hellhound because it made the creepy noise foxes make, which just sound like screaming, you know. So maybe he saw that, just a silhouette of a creature perhaps, and then thought, oh my god, Hellhound, run. That might have been the case. Maybe they were getting movement on the board at the same time, and that freaked them out a lot, and then they left. That's what I suspect happened. That's the issue with doing it in an outdoor environment, because you can see creatures and things because they are naturally there in the world, and in that kind of setting, if it's not a well-lit area, your mind's gonna tell you, oh, it's this creepy thing, because you're in a creepy environment. Now, as for the planchette, I've speculated in the written post that I don't think it's a mouse. I've speculated that it could have been a mouse. That's just the first thing everyone jumps to, isn't it? Whenever they say, oh, whenever someone said, oh, I've heard movement in my room, they're like, oh, you've probably just got a mouse in there. I don't think it's that. I think, because he said it's under his bed, and he's put the Ouija board under his bed, that implies there's other stuff under his bed as well. I would speculate that it was just a spider. There's been one moment in the past, actually might have been a couple of moments in the past, but where I've been sitting in a quiet room and with paper on the floor, and then I've heard this faint scratching type of noise, and it sounds very, very, very similar to a planchette sliding over a Ouija board. That slight scratch that you get. But then I discovered it was just a spider walking across some paper, because they create this little scratchy noise as they go along paper. So I think that is likely what it was. I don't think it was the planchette moving at all on the Ouija board. I think that, again, he was probably just a bit spooked out by what he'd experienced, and, put the board under his bed, which would have disturbed the area anyway, so anything under there would have been unsettled. And then when going to sleep, quiet environment, your senses are heightened, you will hear things you wouldn't normally hear. He's then hearing this light scratching, and because of his experiences with the Ouija board, they'll go to, oh my god, it's the planchette, when really it's likely just a spider or something that he hasn't noticed running across some paper. That's what I would suspect, because they do create that noise, and with it being under his bed as well, that's the kind of place that they'll probably be. Now, if the overnight channel had asked more questions about it, like if I was one of the people asking questions, I would have asked, did you have anything else under your bed? Because I do think you need to be skeptical when interviewing people, which, it's one of those where, which angle do you go with it? Because there are a couple of angles you could go. There's one where you can completely believe the person, and you can just be like, oh my god, how did that feel in the moment? How was that for you? And you can ask details on what the person's describing and things. And you could focus more on we believe this, here's a safe space for you to discuss this experience you've been through. Because you've got to remember as well, like, a lot of these experiences, if true, or at least if true to the person, is what I should clarify, is they can be somewhat traumatic. You've got to bear in mind, I mean, look, this guy's saying he's seen a giant creature, a hellhound, and if that is 100% how he is perceiving it, I mean, one, that's going to completely flip your worldview, and two, again, because of all that, it's quite traumatic. So you do have to be somewhat careful when approaching these things. Anyway, but then you'll have the other angle of going at it, which is a bit more of an interrogation, where you're trying to find out whether or not what they're describing they saw is actually what they saw. So if I was there questioning him, I would ask, did you have anything else under your bed, or was it just the Ouija board? How clean do you keep your room? Do you tidy it frequently? Is there no chance of spiders being there? I'd ask that kind of thing, and then depending on his answer, maybe at some point he would be like, oh, you know what? I did find a giant spider shortly after. So this is the importance of questioning people with the experiences that they've had. But I don't doubt with him sharing these experiences that he experienced them. I just think that if there was a second person there, which for the Ouija board session there was, but if they were questioned, they may say, you know what, I experienced something different that day. Like with the Wendigo thing, if his dad had been there looking out the window, what would he have seen? Would he have seen the same thing? Or would he have seen nothing? Would he have just seen the neighbour? I don't know. But you've got to bear this in mind with experiences, that anyone who shares this kind of experience, it's okay saying, whether or not you think it's true, but you need to also bear in mind, if they've shared it, it's probably true to them. And it doesn't mean that they've faked it or made it up or anything like that. It just means that anyone else likely just won't have seen the same thing at the moment at that particular time. So yeah, it's interesting. The Wendigo story and the Hellhound Ouija board stories, very, very interesting. And I think I've probably said all that I've got to say on it. And like I said earlier, it was a bit odd that the Overnight channel didn't know about cryptids or Wendigos, because like I said, I don't know much about it, but I have vague knowledge, and I would expect that from an investigation team who is at the point where they're investigating the Warren Museum. So I would expect that, but yeah. Yeah, I don't think that anything else was particularly discussed. Like I said, if you want to read the full experience, which I have read out here, but if you want to read the question and answer segment, I have done a blog post on it, which I published on the trueparanormal.blogspot.com, where I've also written up my thoughts there. So there might be stuff that I've missed here, there might be stuff that I've forgotten to discuss, there might be more stuff here that I've discussed, I don't know. But if you want to go and read that post, you can do. It'll be much appreciated. And thank you very much for watching what has been a fairly short video, a lot shorter than usual, because it's not been a review, it's just been more a discussion on someone's experience that they've shared. So yeah, and thank you to the Overnight team as well for letting me, you know, talk about the experience and question and answer segment, and just try and highlight the experience for people, so that it gets the word out that people are having these experiences. So thank you very much, and I will not do another review next week because of my funeral. But at least it won't be on Friday. I'll still post something on Friday. I don't know what time it will be that I post it. Depends on when I can connect to Wi-Fi. So it might be Saturday that I do next week's Friday post, but I will try my best to get that out on Friday. As for the video, it'll either be on Thursday or it'll be on Saturday. More than likely, it'll probably be Saturday, but we'll see. It depends on the post, because I've not written it yet, so I don't quite know what I'm discussing yet. But we will see. And yeah, hope you all have a great week, and goodbye.